My impression is the Brazil government is currently fairly positive towards China. Is that correct?
They seem to be. I mean, China doesn't lecture them about human rights. They don't lecture them about the environment. And, they're willing to finance major projects, such as ports. I think, is it Bolivia or Ecuador? Where they,
I think
or
Peru just had a big port, right?
Yeah, Peru just had a big port. So China comes with gifts. I mean, if you look closely at, the structure of for instance, their financing, it's pretty weighted towards the Chinese side, and the benefits accrue more to Chinese business people than they do towards the local population. And you see this all over the world.
I guess big picture, I'm seeing, despite Xi Jinping talking about an ecological civilization, really China is acting more like eco-terrorists.
Eco-terrorists are people who do terrorism for ecological
to support the
protesting
environment.
Well, they're using
reasons.
they're using the ecology they're using terror to get what they want, using the environment.
Well, the different
There's a different name for
definition
that.
of eco-terrorist.
What is that word then?
I don't know that there is a word for that.
So we'll
because
just have a different definition of eco-terrorist.
that's going to be really confusing.
No, it's fine.
Let's see what our guest has to say about that.
You get what I'm saying.
I would say that China incorrectly and purposefully underestimates and underperforms its rhetoric on the environment, and its policies are slowly, but in some ways systematically harming the rest of the world, especially the quote-unquote global South.
That they always say they're defending.
Is there any pushback from the global South? Because the other thing I'm wondering is if one of the things that's helping China in this aspect is that the damaging effects might affect more of the poor people in these areas, whereas the elites in these countries may not.
Dictatorships.
Yeah. So if it's, for example, we had somebody on the show from Mauritania who was talking about the fisheries being completely depleted because Chinese fishing boats were coming and taking all the fish off the coast of the country, but the leader of that country doesn't really care about that. He just enjoys the money that comes from the CCP, but the people who are the fishermen are having a real problem.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a pretty systematic problem and could lead to pretty dire consequences, even militarily, in the South China Sea. I mean, you're already seeing Philippines and Vietnam. They're, strongly protesting, but the Chinese will, physically attack their fishing fleet if they get in their way.
So there is some pushback from like Vietnam, the Philippines, and the South China Sea.
Yeah, I mean, Southeast Asia, getting back to the water problem, and I'm sorry I keep coming back to this, but there's a Mekong River Commission that's been operating since, I think, the 1950s, where all the Southeast Asian nations get together and they talk about water flows and sharing the water. China has refused to join that. So they, Southeast Asia at least, are very conscious of that and keep trying to get the Chinese to pay more attention, to cooperate more, just to share data. Like, here's how much water we're going to keep. Here's when we're going to let it go south. They refuse to do that.
Wait, so it's not just that China is making arbitrary decisions about flow. It's that, like, these Southeast Asian countries, they just want China to share the data on what they're doing, and China won't even share that.
Right. That would be helpful to them because they could then try to plan their plantings and their harvesting and that sort of thing.
They're essentially holding the water hostage, like terrorists.
I can see we're going to come back to this a lot. Is there a recognition on the Chinese side that they're, I guess, like my grandfather worked on a dam on the Yellow River, and back in the 1950s, 60s, 70s. So like this idea of damming the rivers in China, I feel like it comes back to the kind of when the CCP took over China, and they're very pro dam, I suppose. Like the idea of being able to harness the hydroelectric power from these rivers, like it's my impression is that it's only seen as a positive thing to build like these bigger and bigger hydroelectric dams. Is there any recognition that there is an issue with the water flow, or if there's, you know, issues with flooding, with drought? Like, are they concerned that they're building too many dams, even domestically, or do they just think of this as a positive thing?
Well, the authorities in Beijing have always thought, number one, any water that exists in China is a sovereign possession they can use however they want. But you mentioned the Yellow River. I mean, the history of China, I ran across yesterday. They have a history of floods in China and earthquakes also that go back thousands of years. I mean, it's been a major issue, going back thousands of years, and it is a problem because those floods along the Yangtze and the Yellow River, historically they killed, just thousands and even millions of people. It's the Yellow River is interesting since you brought that up. They have pumped a lot of water from the south into the Yellow River for irrigation purposes, but as you know, the population of northeast of China is huge. So they're using that water all the time, and the Yellow River runs dry almost every year at the outlet to the Yellow Sea. So that's kind of symbolic of the water problem that they have. So they need to pay attention to it. I mean, they've got to control the flooding. They need the electricity. But the result is some of the stuff I tried to catalog earlier, and they still haven't solved the problem for North China, at least.